kiss for you.
This is my third time trying to record this video, and I think in that what I've realized is AI is exhausting to talk about. And the part of why it's exhausting to talk about is I've already done a video on AI assistants and the injection of this more generative AI and LLM structure into them, and if that's actually going to be useful or not. I did that video in 2024, the first time both Apple and Google were talking about being able to actually implement this in a functional system, right? And they were big hyping it up, and they're like, oh, look at all these cool things we can do, and that was the main part of the presentation, and then it never happened. And so we come to, now, where both Apple and Google, once again, their 2026 notes are saying, hey, let's do it, but we can do it real this time. And I went on multiple kind of discussions on why I felt like that was a bad idea, or even just the fact of me not believing it's going to work and the ramifications of that. And I ultimately scrapped everything. Overall, like half an hour of discussion just gone, because I realized I just don't care anymore. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to keep blabbering on about this stuff that ultimately is functionally worthless. Not useless, it's helpful, it does things, but it's worthless. It doesn't provide a direct need to the consumer base that you couldn't not already get with existing functionality and existing models. So, because people will look at and people will talk about new models that come out or new entry points, or it can finally do this thing or whatever, but ultimately most people are just using it for research, right? I'm using it for research and troubleshooting. I have gone countless examples of times where, for an example, Apple support couldn't figure out why my iPad wasn't connecting to my computer here. Turns out I did not have the correct services installed, right? When I was doing the thing, it didn't correctly identify services on the machine, and so it wasn't doing the prompt to connect. They couldn't figure that out. I asked AI. Eventually, we got to the steps to figure that out, refresh the stuff, get rid of Apple Music, do iTunes from the web, not iTunes from the Microsoft Store, all that stuff. And it was able to get that, something that I wasn't able to do, and the Apple support wasn't able to do. Another example being the audio stuttering I have. I had a very big problem with audio stuttering here, where my execution time was like 20,000. This is a smaller report, but my execution time here was like 20,000. It was causing blips and glitches and problems with the audio, and I basically couldn't fix it. I've gotten it a little bit better. This was basically relating to downloading and transferring items from drives, and it was messing up the audio. I've gotten it a little bit better, but that took hours and hours of troubleshooting. Even with the assistance of AI, it was still a lot to try and fix this problem, right? But those are just two examples where there was no amount of Googling I could do. There was no amount of effort I could put in to find those solutions, because they just didn't exist. There was too many items, too many things that got changed, too many stuff didn't work. But I was able to narrow it down and get rid of the stuff I didn't need because I had the AI troubleshooting. I've been able to do that since 2022, since the original ChatGPT had been released. I was able to do it on Gemini. I was able to do it on Bard, the previous version of Gemini. I was able to do it on Copilot. Eventually, all these models ended up getting worse for the most part. And only recently we're able to kind of get back some of that quality that you would expect to do some of that troubleshooting research. My mother is using it extensively for research for her, figuring out what she wants to do for her cancer diagnosis, right? There's a lot of things there in terms of because she's kind of on the cutting edge of a lot of the therapies and a lot of things that she's trying to do, right? Because of some issues she's having. And so she's trying to get as much info and up-to-date research as possible to kind of convince the doctors of certain things, right? So she's using it that, and she's relatively successful, but she's also finding it making mistakes and creating links that don't exist and stuff like that. And, she pretty much asked me, okay, so what model should I use? What model should I use if I'm trying to reduce AI LLM models? Yeah. What model should I use if I'm trying to not have that problem, not have all these hallucinations? And I pretty much said, every model is going to hallucinate. Every model is going to give you info that's not necessarily correct, or info that is oversimplified or whatever. It doesn't matter which one you use. You just have to make sure that what you are using is verifiable in some way, right? Giving sources you can check and giving things you can check. And she didn't like that answer, right? She wanted something that just worked, that was just able to, maybe had to, finagle it a bit, but was just able to kind of operate in a zone that allowed it to work with very little oversight, right? And that just wasn't possible. And so, she's been using it, I've been using it, and the general, what's the word? Business population, I guess, at large, people that are focused on business, people that are in businesses that use it frequently, have been using it the same way since that original 2022 launch, right? There is not a ton of things other than the adoption that has really changed from that time period, right? But what you are seeing in contrast to that is a bunch of reductions, right? There was a recent thing canceling or scaling back the Claude Code licenses. Let's just go to The Verge. So we have a thing that isn't AI, right? They've been canceling their Claude Code licenses or a lot of their things. And this is for like normal AI usage. This is not the like hyper expensive generative stuff, right? This is just normal AI usage for code completion and autocomplete and stuff like that. That's been around forever. It's more advanced, obviously, but these are basic AI. This is like the AI you would use to like AI you would use to pilot an RC car, right? In like a hex bug or something, right? Like this is very basic, relatively AI compared to the generative models that use hundreds of thousands of times the power and water and all that, right? So I mention that to say even something as quote unquote simple or as stripped back as coding licenses are starting to be moved around from gigantic companies, and that's just a massive contrast. Or at least not contrast, it's a massive juxtaposition from what it used to be, where people are just kind of using it and, they're having value from it, and they're kind of just like, it's in the background, right? There wasn't a huge need to use it. You could do it if you want. It was kind of like a low stress, low risk, low reward kind of thing. Now, recently, it's an extremely high risk, high reward, or it's a high risk, unknown reward system, because it could allow you to do very interesting things. One of the examples is my mother had to get like an appointment for something, and the reception was closed, and so she had to use an AI chatbot, right? And she was extremely impressed at the chatbot. It was one of the best she had ever used, and it was one of the best reception things she had used, person or otherwise, right? And that was crazy. It was like, how is that possible? And they basically said their CRM system, AI. I don't remember which one it was called, J something, Java or something like that. Their CRM system basically just came with an AI model that they used, and it was just auto done for them, right? They just like plopped it into the thing, drag and drop, and then boom, you're good to go. And it was like incredible. And these two giant companies are trying desperately for the second time, for the majority of the Apple Direct, the 45-minute chunk of this Direct, which is like over half of it, was dedicated to Siri AI, and it's the same thing as their Apple Intelligence stuff, and it's not going to make a difference. It's not functional, and there's not many more ways I can say that it's not going to be functional and it's going to suck, right? And so it becomes really hard to talk about this because I want to go into why. I want to go into like, why is this happening? Why is it doing that stuff, right? But until we get a post-mortem, until we get like after the dust is all settled, after we've scaled back dramatically in terms of what's happening, I can't, because too many things are moving, right? The AI chatbot receptionist in the CRM system is working now, and then a month from now might be literally unusable, and they have to get rid of it, right? Because AI in the generative model is a transient thing. It is built on data that is corruptible and breakable and can be extrapolated. It is not a constant. And that is something that Linus brought up on the Wayne Show on his podcast, is that he used the example of like testing, right? This is transient. If you go to a different browser or go to a different region, this changes. The AI models are not capable, and probably will never be capable, of strict cache and understanding of data, right? It simply plops things up. It simply finds somewhat of an answer for the word testing and gives it to you. And this will change every single time it reloads, every single time it does it again, because it does not cement things. It is not a search engine, it is a model. It is a predictive model. It is a generative model. It creates, right? That's the entire point of why everyone's freaking out. It's because it creates things. It creates them out of thin air. It uses references for it that don't have anything to do with this description, because it uses the references as literally just a reference and then makes whatever the hell it wants up next to it. It's a transient model. It is not a static thing. So I can't tell you why it makes these mistakes. I can't tell you how it keeps happening or why these companies are so insistent on it, because I'll never actually be able to get to a strict point of how they work, since they don't know how they work. These things, similar to what algorithms are elusive. They do not have a stable state. I think stable is the best word I can use. I wonder what happens if I do stable AI. Stable. Other than stability AI, right? Like, AI, this isn't an oxymoron. AI is not stable. It can't be stable. You can try and make things the same, but it isn't, right? And you even see things like videos. It's like, oh, well, it's stable there because it has to constantly produce images and make a move and stuff. It's like, no. Because if you ask it to produce that same exact video again, it won't be able to, right? Like, you won't be able to get the consistent... You might be able to get consistency in a thing you're trying to do, but you won't be able to get consistency between things. Even if you train it extensively, it's a transient model. It changes based on its data, no matter what, right? And so that's why there isn't a lot to talk about. You can try, you can speculate, you can predict, you can be like, oh, it doesn't work for these reasons, but because the AI models constantly, over and over again, fail at being stable, I can't tell you if Siri AI is going to work or not. I suspect it isn't, because assuming the models have not changed, and it doesn't look like they've changed, this will do the exact same and have the exact same problems as Apple Intelligence, and that will stay the same for the foreseeable future, unless we get a dramatic reworking about how models themselves, how language models work regardless, right? This isn't exclusive to AI. Translation apps work the same way, right? Language in general kind of works that way, where like, just because you have a language app and you expect a word to always translate to certain languages and stuff, does not mean that it always does, right? There's a reason that Deep AI and Google and these other translation apps don't all translate the same words, don't all work the same, because they are built on different data. They effectively have, and that's not as generative. It might be now because of how things are changing, but that's an example of models and language models being transient without AI. There's not AI for the most part in this. It's just trying to use a model to translate words, and yet it still runs into the same transient problem. So this is not exclusive to AI use. It just becomes extremely likely to happen, and much more so at a higher scale, because you're literally asking it to effectively do that model hundreds of thousands of times, right? When you ask it to generate a video or generate an image, it runs a form of this translation a bunch of times. And so the fact that it's able to even be as stable as it is for things like words is mostly just based on the fact of how long it's been being worked on, right? And pretty much just luck, right? There's many more words you can train things on than images. In not in the sense of there's more words than images, in the sense that it's easier to understand words than it is to images. Because once again, AI is transient. It doesn't actually understand what it's producing. It's just generating stuff, just making things, right? It can try and source things, as with testing, it can try and do things that are different, but it never actually gets there. And that is why not only can you not, without once this is all over, figuring out why everyone is so upset about it, or like interested in it, or companies are flying off the shelves for it, right? But you also can't predict. You can't be like, oh, Siri AI is not going to work, because it's not stable. It could work. It won't work. It's not, oh, the model's not good enough. It's just, this is how models work. This is how weather models work. This is how translation, like language models work. This is how basically every model in the world works for everything. It's based on data, and it's a predictive model, and it can be wrong or not based on that data, and no amount of more data necessarily gets the model more accurate. And so That's basically what I wanted to look at here, is that discussion and that look at AI and the assistance, and more so just this pull that these companies have, and try and at least explain why, no matter what happens, I don't think that's where this goes. I don't think that it's even possible to start doing this because of what you're seeing happening here, and because of how models themselves end up performing. Sorry if that was crazy. I'm probably going to have to edit this a bit down to get more concise points here. But if you want to see more of these things on the channel, make sure to like, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see everyone in the next video.